Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about the 2023 Student Steel Bridge Competition. Today is Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. My name is Christy Sattler with AISC, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. We are very excited to be kicking off another great competition season, and we are glad that you are joining us today. Whether you are a seasoned competitor who knows the ins and outs of the competition, or you're somebody brand new to the competition who is looking to learn more about where to start, we hope you are all able to walk away with some helpful information as you look forward to next spring. I am joined today by two special guests, Jason McCormick and Javier Moncada. Together, the three of us will give a tour of what to expect this year. Jason McCormick is the chair of the SSBC Rules Committee. He is an Arthur F. Thurnell Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of Michigan, where he has taught and conducted research on steel structures for over 14 years. He has served as the chair of the Student Steel Bridge Competition Rules Committee since June of 2018. And then Javier Moncada is the SSBC National Head Judge. Javier is a professional engineer and works as a senior associate and construction project manager for the city of Lake Oswego. He was involved in SSBC for 3 years while in college and has been the regional head judge in the Pacific Northwest since 2013. And he was mentored by the previous national head judge for 2 years before assuming the role this year. And then Dita Frank, who is AISC's education coordinator, is also on the line and helping us out in the background. So here's a brief agenda of the things that we will cover during today's presentation. We'll do a brief introduction and a couple of announcements about the webinar. Then I will turn it over to Javier, who will give an overview of the competition, just a nice big picture overview of all the different elements. And then Jason will take it over and talk about the rules changes that you'll see in 2023. And then we'll wrap up by talking about the team resources that are available to support you as you get started and throughout the competition season. And then we will take questions at the end. So speaking of questions, all questions can be asked in the chat feature. You can type your question at any point during the presentation, and then we will answer those as time allows at the end. If you are looking to maybe ask a more anonymous question, you can select from the dropdown and ask the question just to the host and panelists. I do want to mention that there are no specific rules questions here. If you have a question that's about the interpretation of the rules, those need to be asked on the rules and clarifications page on the SSBC website. And then the webinar is also being recorded, and so we will post that recording within a few days so you can reference it later or share it with some of your team members who are not able to join us today. And then I also want to give a special shout out to our program sponsors. We have several generous companies that have helped support the SSBC. And so this helps us provide the standardized equipment for all of the regions so that way all of you have the same set of equipment to use during your competitions. And this also helps us provide the $500 teams participation stipend that we'll talk about later in the presentation. So it's thanks to these companies' generosity that we're able to continue to provide additional support to your teams. All right, so then as we dive in, let's do a quick polling question to see who's in our audience. So you should see a poll popping up in your Zoom window. And so the question is, how would you describe your experience with the SSBC? Just want to get a feel for who we have out there. So are you a pro, someone who's participated recently and really knows the ins and outs? Are you a newbie who is brand new to the competition? Maybe we have some faculty advisors on the line who are seasoned or new, or some super fans who are not participating but just want to know more about the competition. So I'll give just a couple more seconds to let you fill out that, put in your answers. And let's see, get them in. And we'll go ahead and end the poll and let's see where we are. All right, so we have a wide variety of participants on the line here. So we've got some people who have done this before, and then we also have some new people and then some people in between, a couple faculty advisors. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who are here. And like I said at the beginning, I really hope that you all are able to walk away with some valuable information as you get going. We'll talk today about several different resources that are available on the website. So you can find everything SSBC related at the web address aisc.org/SSBC. And so this is the homepage that you'll see when you get there. On the left-hand side, there are several tabs to navigate to different sections of the website. Just pointing out a couple of highlights. The rules and clarifications button will take you to the page where you can download the official rules, see the official clarifications as those get posted, and then that's also where you can find the form to submit a question to the Rules Committee. And then the team resources page has lots of helpful things for you, again, as you're getting started and throughout the season. So you can click there from that navigation pane. Here's a snapshot of where the regional competitions will be this year. There are 20 regional competitions, and those will be held in conjunction with ASCE Student Symposia events. Some of the hosts are still being finalized with all those details, but this at least gives you a snapshot of where those are all located. And then the national finals will take place at the University of California, San Diego on the first weekend of June. So the top 40 to 45 teams from the regional competitions will qualify for the national finals. All right, and then with that, I'm going to turn things over to Javier, and he is going to give an overview of the competition. So Javier, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Christy. And thank you, students and faculty, for attending and your energy. Next slide. As Christy mentioned, for some of you, this is your first year getting involved, and for some of you, this is your last year as a student being involved. So I also hope that this presentation is empowering and motivating and informative. At a really high level, the vision and the mission of Student Steel Bridge is really to apply the knowledge in school to designing a bridge. So I want you to be safe and apply the lessons in planning and designing, modeling, analyzing, fundraising, fabrication, and construction, and apply it to the rest of your professional career. I want you to cultivate your working relationships with students, faculty, practitioners, steel fabricators, and suppliers, and of course, get involved with your local professional society. Oh, and I want you to have fun. So we're going to review a few of the elements of the competition. We'll go over aesthetics, what your bridge looks like, the poster requirements. We'll go over the 3 phases of construction. We'll discuss loading, lateral and vertical, talk about bridge weights and penalties, mention categories of awards, ceremony, and then we'll finish off with some key topics. Next slide, please. Aesthetics. Your bridge is on display for the entire competition, for the entire participants of the competition to see, and for judges to evaluate the aesthetics. This is an award category. See section 6.2 for more detail about bridge appearance like balance, proportion, elegance, and finish. Section 6.2 also outlines the poster requirements like the free body diagram, the shear moment diagram, the school name, your faculty acknowledgement, and description of accelerated bridge construction methods. Check with your host school and the mailers for the location and the schedule, day and time of where your bridge needs to be, when and where your bridge needs to be displayed in the designated bay area. This is a category, so it's important to be on time. Next slide, please. All right, what I like to call phase 1 of construction, this is your pre-construction. So again, watch for your mailer from your host university for the schedule, but at the designated time, the students will disassemble their bridge out of their display area and move it into the staging area, which is on the outside of your construction lanes. Judges are checking the materials. The bridge is actually only built out of 3 different materials. It's made out of magnetic steel, loose bolts, and nuts. We use magnets and a permanent wooden and a pre-made wooden box to check the member lengths and the widths. If any member is too long or too wide, the judges will let you know. Next slide, please. All right, phase 2. It's time to build your bridge. The bridge is built inside of the construction zone, which is inside of the the staging yards, and judges are watching builders move their members from the staging yard into the construction zone. They're tracking accidents like dropping nuts or bolts or members, or stepping out of bounds or stepping into the river. Accidents add time to your overall build time. So judges are walking around your bridge and tracking accidents and calling them out as they're occurring. Now, notice in these pictures the flooring. On one end, we've got some turf, and you've got wooden plywood as the construction flooring, and on the other one, we've got some carpet. I've also been to a competition where we had to build the bridges outside in an asphalt parking lot, and then I've heard about a roof, concrete rooftop. So these are the existing conditions that apply to the entire region during that competition. Before construction starts, judges will check with the captain to make sure the time that the team is ready to build. Okay, next slide. Thanks. Phase 3 of construction is in section 9. This is after the bridge is built. Judges are making measurements using our wooden templates and tape measures. We're checking functionality to make sure that the decking will fit onto the bridge and the stringers. Usability, if there's some issues there, there's some conversations we have to have. Connection safety, and make sure that the bolts and fasteners are connected. If there repairs need to be done, this will be the time that repairs are done. If there's any dimensional violations, these penalties add weight to your bridge. We'll get into that in a little bit. Next slide. Teams will move their bridge into the lateral loading, and the judges will help you set up the decking in the proper location, and a 75-pound counterweight will set up the sway device and the target. This year's sway is 1 inch. We'll put a 50-pound weight, and then we'll also apply a lateral restraint to prevent the bridge from sliding. If your bridge sways too much during this load, it won't qualify for awards. Next. Vertical loading. This is the 2,500 pounds that are applied to your bridge. Exactly where it's applied is based on the die roll, which we'll get to in a little bit. These are applied using angle irons, and section 11.5 will go into detail of exactly how it's applied. We've got some supports so the bridge doesn't catastrophically collapse, which it does happen in some regionals and at nationals. It's done safely. You can see in the picture the red gauges. We're measuring deflections in 2 locations this year. Next slide. Oh, I forgot to mention that we're also making sure that you're unloading your bridge safely. We're not tracking sway or deflection at that point, but just ensure that the bridge doesn't collapse during unloading. The bridge weight after all the deflection is taken off, then the bridge is moved into the weight station. There's 4 digital scales. You'll work with the judge to write down the bridge weight at each corner. I mentioned section 8 and section 9 have penalties, dimensional violations of members or tolerance violations will add weight to your bridge. So this will be the actual weight plus the penalty weight. After this, you're almost done with the competition. It's time to move the bridge out into the yard or back into your staging area where you can disassemble your bridge. Section 6.2 outlines all the award categories. Aesthetics, speed is how fast you built the bridge. The lightest bridge, the bridge that is the stiffest or deflected the least amount. Construction economy is the speed times how many builders it took. Structural efficiency is deflection and weight. Overall performance is just the sum of the construction economy and structural efficiency. Cost estimation is a somewhat newer award, and it's the absolute value difference between what your overall performance of your bridge, how much your bridge cost, versus what you think it was going to cost before the competition started. So I'll get into that in a little bit in the next slide. We take the top 3 in each category, and they receive awards during the regional banquet. There's also a national video award, and there's also some additional special awards that happen at nationals. Next slide. I mentioned the cost estimate, section 6.28. This is due before the die roll, and what it is it's your there's the equations in the rules for overall performance, and you put together a cost estimate for your 6 load cases, and you present it at the captain's meeting in the ID. Each team will have to designate a team captain during the competition. This is the person that talks to the judges and corresponds with the head judge. And so we have a captain's meeting. Again, check your mailer for when that is. The head judge will clarify any rules, competition flow, and then answer any questions. Table 7.1 outlines the 6 loading categories. This determines where the decking goes on the bridge during loading, lateral and vertical. And it happens either at the captain's meeting, or it'll happen right before the first bridge is built. Can't modify your bridge after the roll. After each station, starting with pre-construction, each team will have a data form, and that data form tracks your bridge, if there's any violations, or how many builders, or how much time it took to build your bridge, how much your bridge weighed, how much your bridge deflected. After each station, the judge will check in with the team captain and have you sign each form. At the end of the competition, the captain will sit down with the official scorekeeper, and all that information gets inputted into the official scorecard. You'll get a computed scorecard that shows summarizes your build time, your actual build time with any penalties or accidents, and your bridge weight with any penalties, and then your overall cost. Now, the official will know what the rankings are as the competition goes, and they don't typically share that. But and then they'll keep your handwritten signed data form for any issues that may arise and for record keeping. Section 15 discusses appeals. I won't go into it in too much detail, but appeals start with a verbal appeal, and it's by the captain, and the captain can give an appeal, an oral appeal on a penalty or a decision or a measurement, a score, a condition of the competition, or interpretation of the rule. I'll have a conversation with the head judge, and we'll hear the oral appeal and make a ruling. And if you don't agree with the ruling, there's some decisions that could be, a process that's outlined in section 15. The pictures I showed of these bridges are from years past. They're unique bridges and connections and don't exactly apply to this year's rules. And now here's Jason with the 2023 rule changes that will help shape your bridges this year.
Thanks, Javier and Christy. And I also want to take a moment just to thank the members of the Rules Committee and everyone at AISC and ASCE that worked hard to bring you the 2023 rules and competition. So I hope all the student teams out there are excited for the 2023 Student Steel Bridge competition. I know I am. I always look forward to seeing what you do with the rules each year. And with this webinar, we wanted to briefly go over some of the major changes to the rules this year. But keep in mind, by no means what is covered in this webinar is all the changes that were made between the 2022 rules and the 2023 rules. So this does not substitute for thoroughly reading through the rules and understanding what all those smaller changes are. Next slide, please. So as with every year, we want teams to have a positive experience while learning to meet design requirements. So you're going to be designing, fabricating, constructing, and loading, and seeing how load affects the bridges that you design. We want you to have a positive experience while going through this. It should be challenging, but it should be positive in the end. And as such, year to year, we make changes to the rules really to renew the challenge for teams so that you can't necessarily reuse the same bridge, and so that you're facing different constraints every single year as you're competing in the competition. I believe that this year's rules accommodate a variety of design choices and creativity. So feel free to be innovative in how you approach the competition and how you approach the design of your bridge. Now, it may not seem that way, but none of us want to actually see your bridge become ineligible for loading. And we've taken to heart some of the comments that came out of last year's competition, and we've tried to minimize some of the penalties that lead to a bridge being ineligible for loading, and try to keep all bridges eligible as best we can for all awards. So the only time a bridge really at this point will be ineligible for loading will be because of safety concerns for obvious reasons. Also, there were some minor changes made to the number of teams that are eligible from each region. So we've increased the number of teams that may be eligible based on the number of non-guest teams that are actually competing. So you can take a look at subsection 4.4.2 and compare it to last year's rules if you have a question in regards to that. Next slide, please. So as far as this year's bridge, we're asking you to build a bridge for the San Diego National Wildlife Refuge. This was chosen largely because of where the national competition is going to take place, since it's taking place in San Diego this year. This bridge is going to have to cross the Sweetwater River. And because we're in a wildlife refuge, no construction will be allowed within the river, and no permanent or temporary piers are allowed within the river or elsewhere in the construction site except for the footings. So the bridge can only touch the ground where the footings are located. Also, as always, we're asking you to provide a 1/10 scale model of the bridge. Next slide, please. So here you can see this year's construction site. There isn't too many significant changes. Note that the construction zone is about 24 feet long, and then slightly skewed in that construction zone is a 7-foot wide river that runs perpendicular to the length of the construction zone. So we have a river this year instead of a highway like there was last year. The only other major change was we expanded the staging yard. Next slide, please. So you can look here and see further details in regards to the construction zone and river detail. You can note that the footings are at the farthest extents of the construction zone, and there's no skew associated with the footings this year. With the staging yard, you can see that the location for members, tools, nuts, and bolts really hasn't changed from last year. It's still 6 feet in length there, but we've added an extra 2 feet to the staging yard because we've declared an area where we want builders to start. So rather than builders starting anywhere within the staging yard, builders are going to start in that first 2 feet of the staging yard. Next slide, please. As far as bridge dimensions, you can find all the changes associated with that in subsection 9.3. There are substantial changes in regards to the bridge dimensions this year compared to last year. Some of the major things to note is that the bridge this year needs to be between 23 feet and 24 feet long. So this is one of the longest competition bridges that there's been over the history of the Student Steel Bridge competition. Also note that the max height of the bridge is 5 feet, and the clearance under the bridge is 4 inches everywhere except for over the footings where obviously the bridge can touch the ground. On the right there, you see a section view through the bridge envelope. This is as if you're looking down the length of the bridge. You can note that the maximum width of the bridge is 5 feet wide, and that the top of the stringers need to be located between 2 foot 2 inches at a maximum and 1 foot 10 inches at a minimum from the ground. So the top of the stringers is where the loading grates will be placed, where the load will then be applied. Also note, for the top of the stringers, we removed the restriction on holes in the top of the stringers. This often causes significant confusion. We decided to remove that restriction, although I do suggest that you make sure the top of your stringer is able to handle the grating that would be placed on it. Also note that there's a reference to the stringer template. That stringer template defines the passageway which needs to be available within the bridge. So there can't be any obstructions within that passageway. Next slide, please. So here you can see a more close-up view of that stringer template. So that needs to be able to pass through the bridge along the length of the bridge without any restrictions. Also, the top of the stringers need to fit within those 2-inch by 1-inch high rabbets. So the top of the stringer should always be in contact with the top of those rabbets throughout the process of moving that stringer template, which you can see as a piece of plywood in the bottom right picture there. Must always be in contact as that's dragged along the length of the bridge. Right, so nothing like bolts, members, nuts can obstruct the movement of that piece of plywood, that stringer template, through the length of the bridge, or there will be a penalty associated with that. Next slide, please. Now, as far as connections, there actually wasn't that significant of a change in the connection requirements. We've made some changes in order to hopefully make it a little easier to understand the intent of the rules. So we have updated some of the definitions. So the definition of connection is a location where all fang surfaces resulting from 2 or more members coming in contact are penetrated by at least one loose bolt and secured by a loose nut, preventing the members from separating at that location without first removing the loose bolt or bolts that connect them. And we also simplified the definition of fang surface. It used to contain some further restrictions. So now that definition says the surface of a member that is in contact with the surface of another member at a connection. It's really just defining the surface. It's not putting any rules type qualifications on that surface. Next slide, please. So if you look at subsection 9.4.1, it essentially tells you that all locations where one member touches another member require a connection. So if you have 2 members and they touch both at the tops of the members and at the bottom of the members, but don't necessarily touch in the middle, then there needs to be a connection at both the top and at the bottom. So separate connections associated with that. That's essentially what that rule is, that subsection is saying. And then you move to subsection 9.4.2 that better defines the requirements of that connection. So that says each connection shall contain at least 1 and at most 2 fang surfaces associated with each member being connected. This is pretty similar to last year's rules. And then under that, it says that the fang surfaces are the only location where members are in contact with each other. So if there's contact and if there's a fang surface, there needs to be a connection there and it needs to meet the connection requirements of 9.4.2. Now, one change that we made is that we said that the fang surfaces shall not have an inflection point. Last year, we allowed complex curves in regards to the fang surfaces. Now you can only have a gradual curve, no inflection point in that fang surface. And like last year, we said that contact surfaces on either side of a corner or bend shall be treated as separate fang surfaces, but they'd be separate fang surfaces of the same connection. And we've put in definitions of corner and bend into the glossary this year. Also, every fang surface shall be penetrated by at least 1 bolt secured by a loose nut. There's no real change to that this year from last year. But we have added a note that says that minor unintentional gaps between fang surfaces of members due to membrane fabrication imperfections are allowed. This is to eliminate some of the confusion last year in terms of how to deal with something if, say, maybe there's weld splatter or if something's not completely flat, it has a little wave in it. That is allowed provided that none of the gaps or the kind of bumps that may be there actually prohibit the movement of the materials relative to each other, movement of the fang surfaces relative to each other. And like last year, we're not allowing cam locks, dovetails, tube and tube, sleeved, and other mechanical or interlocking connections. Really what we're looking for is that the load be transferred through the bolt. Next slide, please. Now, unlike last year, this year we will provide some example drawings and pictures to help clarify the intent of the rules. We're hoping to have these out towards the end of October, early November for you. And an announcement will go out in terms of when these are available. Next slide, please. Now, where we did make some major changes to the connection rules was in how they're penalized. So this year, if there is a connection violation identified by the judges for subsection 9.4.1, 9.4.2, 9.4.3, and 9.4.4, teams will have an optional 5 minutes to actually correct that connection violation. If they choose to use that optional 5 minutes, they will be assessed a 5-minute time penalty. Now, if the connection violation still exists after 5 minutes, or if the teams choose not to correct that violation, then a 2-minute penalty will be assessed for each individual violation of 9.4.1 through 9.4.4 that still exists. So the bridge will be able to continue on with the competition, will be eligible for all awards, and will be eligible for loading, even though those violations still exist. This also brings in kind of an interesting question that teams are going to have to think about, that if you only have 1 or 2 connection violations and you think that they're not going to have a specific detrimental effect on your deflections, you may choose not to actually correct them and take 2 minutes or 4 minutes worth of penalties rather than the 5-minute penalty to actually correct it. So those are going to be some decisions that teams are going to have to make over the course of the competition. There also is a new 2-minute penalty if the fairing surface is not inspectable. And obviously we can't see the fairing surface themselves because that's in contact with another fairing surface. What we're talking about here is the ability to be able to kind of see if 2 things are touching. We need to be able to see if there is contact between the members there. Next slide, please. One of the major changes this year is that we are not allowing welded nuts and bolts. So welded nuts and bolts are not allowed as part of a connection. They're also not allowed for use of any other kind within the bridge. So no welded nuts and bolts. If there is a welded nut or bolt, that would be a violation of subsection 8.2.2. Next slide, please. So looking at the lateral loading, Javier provided a little explanation in terms of the lateral loading. I'll focus largely on the 2023 rules with respect to lateral loading. So there's only a single lateral load test this year, unlike last year where there was 2. The location for the grading will be measured from the west end of the north side stringer based on that distance S, which will be defined by the die roll, and that will be either 7 feet, 10 feet, or 13 feet. The 50-pound load will be applied to the south side of the bridge, and the sway will be measured on the south side. And as Javier mentioned, the sway must not exceed 1 inch. Last year, the sway must not exceed 0.75 inches. So we've increased the allowable sway. So as long as that laser dot remains within a 2-inch diameter circle, you're going to pass the lateral loading test. Next slide, please. For the vertical load, really nothing's changed from past years. You have 2 gradings. The first grading is going to be placed at L1, the second grading at L2. Both of those distances are measured from the west end of the north side stringer, and their distances are based on the die roll that's done at the beginning of the each individual competition. Deflection is going to be measured on the north side and on the south side of the bridge, and we're also going to observe sway on the south side of the bridge during loading. 1,400 pounds will be placed on the grate at L1, and 1,100 pounds will be placed at the grate in L2. We've also tried to communicate to judges that if angles are being used for loading, that those should be placed in an interlocking manner, and that there should be consistency with how the different teams are placing the load on their bridge. Next slide, please. We've updated the construction economy and structural efficiency equations. So now the cost per person minute is $100,000. And then the cost in terms of penalized time is $250,000 per minute. When looking at the structural efficiency, you can see that the measured weight is going to be raised to an exponent of 1.85 and then multiplied by 45 in order to get the cost associated with the weight. And then the penalized weight is going to be multiplied by 2,500 pounds. And the aggregate deflection is going to be multiplied by 2,750,000 pounds. What we've done is we've tried to normalize things so that the penalties associated with construction economy, instructional efficiency pretty much have similar effects in terms of the scores. Next slide, please. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of the largest changes that were made between the 2022 rules and 2023 rules. What I wanted to do now is just talk a little bit about the rules clarification process. Next slide, please. So you're allowed to submit questions in terms of clarifications with respect to the rules. But the questions are limited really to interpretation of the rules. We cannot, as a rules committee, validate specific designs or procedures. We can't do that for every team, so we're not going to do it for any team. Essentially is the way that comes down to. Now, there are times that you may submit something and we can turn that into a more general question about the rules, and we'll go ahead and do that and try to answer that question. But that may be the reason why a question comes out that's slightly different than what you initially asked. The other thing to keep in mind is that to make sure that your question is clear, we need to be able to interpret your question. And if the clearer the question is, the more closely we're going to get to the actual answer that you're looking for. Now you're going to submit questions through aisc.org/SSBC, as Christy had mentioned previously. It'll typically require 2 weeks to provide a response, although the initial clarifications that came out since the rules were put in place will take a little longer, but they should be out hopefully next week if you've submitted a clarification already. Responses are only posted under the official Student Steel Bridge Competition clarification, so you won't receive an individual email with the response. They're all only posted on that official Student Steel Bridge Competition clarifications. And this is so that everybody's seeing the same thing at the same time. And again, those are at the aisc.org/SSBC website. So I highly suggest you sign up for email updates, because if you sign up for the email updates at that website, you will receive an update every time new clarifications are posted. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the process for clarifications, what will happen is once you submit a clarification question, you'll then receive a confirmation email from the Rules Committee that the clarification request was received. Typically, this will come within a week of you submitting that clarification request. That email will either state that your request is being taken under review, or will point you to a specific section of the rules that answers the question if the committee thinks that that question is really already answered in the rules. Now, if you go look at that specific section and you still have questions, feel free to resubmit a clarification request with some more details in regards to why it's unclear, or respond to that confirmation email that you received. Now, if a request is being taken under review, then a clarification question and answer are developed that are appropriate for posting. These are reviewed and discussed by the Rules Committee until a final version is agreed upon. And this process usually takes 1 to 2 weeks. And then keep in mind, clarification questions and answers are typically posted in batches. So that may be why some things are delayed depending on where your submission was with respect to the last batch. Although if a single clarification comes in and there's no others for a little while, it'll get posted as a single clarification. So don't worry too much about that. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Christy to talk about additional team resources.
All right, thank you, Jason. So we'll talk about several team resources that are available to you to kind of help get you started now, and then also support you throughout the competition season and as you get ready for the spring. The first thing I want to point you towards is the competitor's guide. This is a comprehensive PDF document that's on the team resources page. It gives a great overview of just how to get your team started and make a plan for the season. So there's a planning checklist. There's more information about the different team resources. And then the bulk of the guide is dedicated to a description of the competition elements and what you can expect at each station. So for those of you who are newer to the competition, this is a great place to start to get an understanding of what happens at each of the stations that Javier described earlier in the presentation. There's also an opportunity for your team to potentially get partnered up with a team mentor who's in your area. So we have partnered with the National Council of Structural Engineers Associations, or NCSEA. So they have 44 member organizations all across the country, which are shown here in green. And these are basically structural engineering associations. And they have identified a delegate in each of those organizations who can help point you towards a structural engineer in your area who may be able to mentor your team. And what would a mentor typically do? Well, there's a lot of different options. A mentor may be able to provide some guidance on the design of your bridge and some feedback. They might be able to give you some advice about structural analysis software and how to use it, or what would be good for this type of design. They also may be able just to serve as a general mentor for your team. Each of those relationships may look different. So you can visit the web address that's here on the screen, and you can also access this by navigating through the website. And it's as simple as filling out a form, and then we'll send you the contact list of these delegates at each of the 44 member organizations. And then you can reach out to them, tell them what you're looking for, and then they'll try to help you find somebody. And then we'll also give you an email template to get you started as well. Now, if you're a team that's located in one of the states that's gray and not green, don't panic. You can still take advantage of this. It just means that there's not necessarily an organization in that state, but NCSEA can still help you try to find somebody. So if you want to look through the list and see if there's a nearby state that makes sense geographically, that's great. If you're having a hard time, there's also a contact in that form for Leo Barron at NCSEA, and he can help direct you to the right spot. So feel free to take advantage of that. There's also an opportunity to request our help with getting partnered up with a local fabricator. So AISC has an extensive membership network of fabricators, as well as erectors and producers and several other individuals and companies in the steel industry. And a fabricator may be able to help in many different ways. They might be able to help you order materials for your bridge, or perhaps even donate them. They might make some other monetary contributions to support your team. A fabricator may be able to provide some guidance on constructability. And then in some cases, they might be able to assist with fabrication. We do encourage you to participate in as much of the fabrication process as possible, but that may look different on a lot of different campuses. Not all of you have readily accessible shop facilities. So a fabricator may be able to help you with some of that. So you can fill out a short form on our website. We will then follow up with a list of about 5 to 10 fabricators that are close to you geographically, and you can reach out to them. We'll give you an email template for that as well. And then we will also give those companies a heads up that they might be hearing from you. For those of you who are faculty advisors, there's a faculty resources page on the SSBC site. There's a faculty advisor guide that gives an overview of the competition and kind of what to expect from the advisor side and how to support your team. And there's several other guides about safety, expectations as a faculty member, and then a short video presentation about the competition, again, from the perspective of a faculty advisor. We've mentioned a couple times about the SSBC mailing list. So that is the best way to get the most up-to-date information about the competition. So we will send regular updates throughout the season to let you know about things that are going on and give you a heads up. That is also how the clarifications are posted. So we'll post those to our website, and then we will send a notification when there's new ones available. So you can request to join that list a couple different ways from our website. Over on the right-hand side, on several of the pages under SSBC links, there's a simple button that says request email updates. You can also navigate to the team resources page and request it there. We also have a short 1-minute video about the Student Steel Bridge competition that you may use to try to recruit new team members. So it's a fun, short overview of the competition just to kind of get people excited about what it entails. So you are welcome to use that video and share it with those on your campus, or however you see fit. And then teams that participate in a regional competition are eligible for a $500 team stipend. So this is for you to use as you best see fit for your team. And so to receive this and some other sponsor benefits, you'll need to fill out a form with ASCE. So that would be the ASCE Student Chapter SSBC participation form. That lets us know that you are planning to participate, and it also gives us the information for where to send the check. And then there's an additional component to that this year. It's a statement of intent and acknowledgement of eligibility requirements. So it's a simple form that you as the team captain and the faculty advisor should review, just acknowledging that you've read through the rules and understand the eligibility requirements, especially as they relate to advancing to the national finals. So the link to that form from ASCE will be provided in the first mailer from your host school. So be on the lookout for that. And again, it should be completed by October 30th. If you are a guest team and you are not participating as part of an ASCE student chapter, reach out to us at University Programs and we'll talk through the process to get you your stipend. We also have a new feature on our website. We have a participation map. So once we receive your submission on that SSBC form, participation form, and we know that you're planning to participate, we'll add you to this map. So this map will continue to grow over the coming months. You'll be able to see what schools are planning to participate in which region. And then there's also an optional feature as well. So you'll see your team listed on the map. And then if you would like to provide a website link or maybe some contact information, we can post that as well. So then if a potential sponsor is looking to see what teams in their area are participating, they can get a hold of you. So again, you provide a website link or perhaps the handle for a social media account, whatever that may be. So you can submit that as part of the SSBC participation form as well. So that brings us to kind of the end of the formal part of today's presentation. So really just the next steps for you planning to participate is first watch for that first mailer from your host school. That should be coming sometime in October. And that will then contain the link to that form from ASCE. So you'll need to fill that out to let us know that you plan to participate as an SSBC team. Fill out that statement of intent and upload that with the instructions that are provided. Do that by October 30th, and then we will start sending those team stipends sometime in November. So you'll get a physical check in the mail. And then of course, be sure to request those email updates so you can get the most up-to-date information throughout the year. So with that brings us kind of to the question and answer portion of today's webinar. So as a reminder, you can submit your questions through the chat window of Zoom. And then we'll collect those and try to get through as many of those as we can with the time that we have left. So the first question we have is, will wildcards be eligible for the national finals again this year? So for some of those of you who participated in the past, there's sometimes the option or opportunity to participate and advance to the national finals as a wild card. So it's basically if you aren't in that top group of qualifying teams, if you're the next person in line, let's say there's 2 that advance from your region, and then you're the 3rd place team, we'll put you into a drawing. And then depending on whether or not we have the space for the national finals, we may award some wild cards. So we would draw from that list and invite some additional teams to the national finals. So it kind of depends. Let's see, the next question is, where can I access the recording for this video? So as I mentioned, we'll record this webinar, it's being recorded, and we will post it up on the SSBC site. We'll put a link to it on the team resources page, and then there's also a webinars dedicated page where you can find it there. Let's see. Next question. So this is related to the violations, Jason. So if you choose to take the 5 minutes to correct something, and then you do not use all of that time, will the full 5 minutes be penalized?
So yes, that 5-minute penalty is no matter how much, if you use 1 minute to correct that violation, as opposed to all 5 minutes, it's still going to be a 5-minute penalty that's assessed for having to correct a violation.
Okay, great, thanks. And then we've seen, I think there's a couple of questions here about the mailing list. So again, how do you sign up and how do you know if you're on the mailing list? So again, you can sign up on the website. There's several links on the team resources page, and then as you navigate through the site. And we send emails on a pretty regular basis. Again, there'll be a notification when the first clarifications come out. And then we send kind of a newsletter type every month or so. So you should start receiving those right away once you do sign up. And so that's also, there was a question about how can I receive the announcement on the connection drawings that Jason talked about, when those will be available later this fall. We'll let you know through that mailing list. So once those are posted and available on the website, we'll send you an email and you can check those out. Another question is, when will the score sheet be available? So as Javier mentioned, there is an official score sheet that's used at the regional competitions as well as the national finals. Those will be, that'll be posted in early 2023. And the other thing too to keep in mind is that all the equations that are in that score sheet are included in the rules as well. So you can build your own spreadsheet if you're trying to do some initial calculations. Jason, is there anything else that you want to make a comment on about the score sheet?
No, that was largely it, that those construction economy and structural efficiency equations are there. So you can build your own spreadsheet if you're looking to evaluate your different designs and different construction speeds and things like that. So you don't necessarily need the official score sheet to be able to do that. So just keep that in mind moving forward. Okay.
Let's see. Another question is, how much of the nut is allowed to be covered in order for it to be considered to be inspectable?
So really what's being inspected there is whether the bolt is fully engaged by the nut. So the judge needs to be able to see whether the end of the bolt is flush with the end of the nut or sticks out further than the nut. So as long as it's flush or sticks out further, it's okay. So really that's what's being inspected. You don't necessarily need, the judge doesn't necessarily have to see the whole nut, just the end. Okay.
All right. And then, yeah, like I said, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to add those in the chat. And I'll give you a couple more minutes if you have anything else that you want to add. In the meantime, I'll put Jason and Javier on the spot. We have, several new teams on the line today. So if you could give them a piece of advice or something that they should try to avoid kind of as they're getting started, what kinds of things would you tell them?
Jason, can I go first?
Go for it.
As I mentioned, I've been in your guys' shoes. I was a first-year student steel bridge participant. So I do have some pro tips for you, and Christy, thank you so much for asking. So my first pro tip is make early connections, and by that I mean, yes, think about your steel connections, but make connections with other students to build your team, with faculty, with student steel bridge alumni, with steel suppliers, and with your professional organizations. Pro tip 1, make early connections. Number 2 pro tip is learn the lingo. I think one of the best resources that to start with is the glossary in the rules. That defines all the lingo. And from there's hyperlinks that gets you to where you need to be in the rules. But pro tip number 2, learn the lingo, start with the glossary. Pro tip 3, use your resources, track your mailers. Pro tip 4, stay involved. Okay, keep at it. This is your first year. You'll learn. You'll just build on what you learn. Keep coming back, stay involved. Foreshadowing for pitch to be a judge someday. And then the last tip is be safe and have fun. Those are Javi's pro tips.
Thanks, Javier. I think the only thing I really have to add to that is if you're just starting out, keep things simple, right? Don't try to go over the top in terms of what you're doing. Take a look at, there's a number of pictures out there of what people have done in the past and what an actual bridge looks like. Do some exploring so that you understand kind of roughly what you're trying to do. And then, like Javier said, use the resources around you. You have faculty members that are around you. You have professionals that are around you that can provide some advice. So make sure you utilize those, and that networking can also help out for the future.
All right, well, thank you to you both. Those are excellent pro tips, especially for the new folks, and then even maybe some who've been here before. So it looks like that brings us to the end of our questions for today. So I just want to give one more big thank you to Jason McCormick and Javier Moncada for joining us today. And for all of those who are in the audience, we're very excited for the 2023 Student Steel Bridge Competition. Be sure to check out all of the resources that are on the website, sign up for that email list so you can stay up to date. And we look forward to seeing all of you in the spring. So best of luck, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.